Last week, I was sitting in a quiet, high-end lounge in the city. You know, the kind of place where you'd expect to see young professionals networking or subtly scouting for partners.
Right.
I struck up a conversation with a guy who looked like he'd be the prize in any dating market fit, articulate, clearly successful. But when the topic of the 2026 Global Intimacy White Paper came up, his reaction wasn't what I expected at all.
Oh.
He didn't complain about the dating scene. Instead, he just pulls out his phone, shows me a completely empty social folder, and smiles with this chilling kind of clarity. He says, "I'm not playing anymore. The ROI on human interaction has officially hit 0.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. He told me he'd spent the last year in what he called total monk mode. And he wasn't angry or lonely. He sounded like an actuary describing a bad investment.
It's a powerful image.
He explained it between the digital mirror effect, making ordinary men invisible, and the infinite curated harem of alpha simulacra on every woman's feed. The cost of competing had become a tax he was no longer willing to pay.
So he just opted out.
Completely. To him, the digital world hadn't just changed dating. It had hacked the evolutionary algorithm itself, creating a behavioral sink where the only winning move was to stop playing. As he spoke about dopamine substitution and simulated connection, I realized I wasn't looking at a man who had given up.
You were looking at someone who had made a strategic choice.
A strategic withdrawal, exactly. His calm, almost detached dismissal of the most basic human drive was, frankly, more unsettling than any loud protest. It made me wonder, is the sexual wasteland of 2026 a sign of our decline? Or is it the first rational response to a system that has finally managed to outsmart our own biology?
And that question, what happens when the beautiful ones in our modern mass utopia aren't the ones winning the game, but the ones who had the sense to walk away from the table entirely?
Yeah.
That encounter you had, it just perfectly encapsulates the mission of this deep dive. We were moving past the anecdotes, past all the usual noise about hookup culture or commitment issues, and really diving into the algorithmic, the biological, and the economic forces at play.
And our sources for this, they range from, deep evolutionary psychology reviews and neurobiology, all the way to hard data from dating apps and some pretty pointed social commentary.
And they all seem to suggest that what we're observing is precisely what your lounge companion called it: a system crash.
Okay, let's unpack that. We're not talking about just a simple societal trend here.
No, not at all.
We're talking about a fundamental breakdown in the actual mechanism of human pairing. Our source material is suggesting that this widespread decline in intimacy, particularly in the heterosexual sphere, is less about a loss of desire.
And more about a rational calculation.
Yeah, that the effort required is now mathematically non-viable for the average person.
Exactly. And our goal today is to analyze this alleged system crash by using these sources to really examine this frighteningly relevant idea of a behavioral sink. We need to figure out if this disengagement, the shift toward digital abstinence, is actually a decline. Or if it is, like the sources say, a calculated strategic withdrawal from a market that's just become completely broken.
We're basically treating the current sexual market as an ecosystem that has been, poisoned by technology.
Deliberately poisoned by information technology. That's a good way to put it. So let's start with that core concept. The system crash.
Right.
The source material argues that the decline in intimacy isn't just people getting less interested. It's defined as a system crash triggered by the biological signal overload of algorithms.
The signal overload, so too much information.
Way too much. And this overload, in turn, it leads to what's called a biological strike. The desire hasn't vanished, and the biological wiring is still there, but the organism, the person, has chosen to disengage because the signals it receives are too overwhelming.
And the cost of acting on them is too high.
Exactly. The environment is just too hostile to generate any meaningful, successful action. It's like an evolutionary timeout.
And the most profound metaphor for this, which comes up again and again in the sources, is the work of John B. Calhoun, The Behavioral Sink.
This is where it gets really fascinating.
It is, because it connects sociology and animal behavior directly to our digital lives. And it suggests that, paradoxically, utopian conditions can lead to a total collapse.
Precisely. We have to talk about John B. Calhoun's infamous Universe 25 experiment, which started back in 1968.
Universe 25.
Calhoun, he was an ethologist, and he wanted to see what population density does to social behavior. So he built a mouse utopia, A perfect enclosure where food and water were infinite.
No predators.
None. Resources were totally abundant, mimicking a perfect, safe material existence. The mice had, materially speaking, everything they could ever need.
So on paper, it's a paradise.
Yeah.
But what happened was, well, it was the opposite of utopia.
It was horrific. The population boomed at first. It was doubling every 55 days, this phase of just explosive, vigorous growth. But as the population got closer to and eventually peaked at around 2,200 mice, the social structure just hit a wall.
And the problem wasn't a lack of food or water.
No, it was a scarcity of social space. And this is the crucial part, a scarcity of meaningful social roles. The environment was so saturated with other mice that the basic necessary social tasks like defending territory or establishing a hierarchy became impossibly complex and stressful.
And that's where the behavioral sink emerged, this state of extreme social pathology that was driven not by deprivation, but by just being overwhelmed.
And in the behavioral sink, traditional social structures dissolved completely. The roles needed for a functional society, the males who protect, the females who nurture, they just broke down.
You saw social chaos.
Total chaos. Males couldn't establish territories, couldn't defend females. It led to brutal, pointless fighting in these dense packs. And the females, overwhelmed by the chaos, they stopped building nests, they started to abandon their young, or in the most extreme cases, they'd cannibalize them.
And the sexual behavior became distorted too, right?
Completely. You saw both hypersexuality mice just engaging in sex everywhere, indiscriminately, and at the same time, a total inability to discern appropriate partners.
And then you get the individuals who just opted out, the ones who are the clearest parallel to what we're talking about today.
Yes, the beautiful ones. This was a distinct class of males, and later, some females, who withdrew entirely from competition, from mating, from all forms of social interaction.
Where did they go?
They retreated to the highest, most isolated pens. They spent their days just meticulously grooming themselves, eating and sleeping in total isolation.
So they were physically perfect because they were never in the fight.
Exactly. Untouched by the chaos, never fought, never mated. But they were entirely socially dead. They had lost the meaning of their existence inside the horde and just checked out of the reproductive contract. They stopped responding to any cues from the opposite sex, preferring this sterile, perfect solitude.
So if we take that finding in organism, in a resource-rich world, choosing social and reproductive suicide because of psychological overload, what does that mean for us? The sources connect this rodent withdrawal directly to the emergence of modern herbivore men and digital aesthetics.
It suggests that they're the human counterparts. They're disengaging from what they see as an impossibly hostile, overly complex, or just feudal social ecosystem. It's a behavioral response to an environment that has become socially poisonous, even if it's materially comfortable.
They're the beautiful ones of the digital age.
Opting for self-preservation and a kind of internal perfection over external painful competition.
Yes. But this withdrawal isn't just about emotional fatigue. The sources really emphasize that for a lot of people, it's a rational, quantified choice.
Absolutely. And this brings us to a really compelling individual account that helps quantify this choice. The story of a man named Marcus, who developed something he called the arithmetic of silence.
The arithmetic of silence.
He wasn't just fed up, he was performing a ruthless cost-benefit analysis. He actually calculated the sexual Gini coefficient of his local dating scene.
Okay, let's pause there and define that. The Gini coefficient is usually for measuring income inequality, right? How does that apply to dating?
Right, it's a scale from 0 to 1. 0 is perfect equality. Everyone has the same number of matches. 1 is maximum inequality. One person gets all the matches. Marcus applied this to the distribution of sexual attention in his city, and he noted this extreme skew caused by dating apps.
And what did he find?
He calculated that a tiny, tiny fraction of men received an overwhelming majority of the matches, the attention, the opportunities. He argued this inequality was far more severe than wealth inequality in most developed nations.
So his conclusion was based on that mathematical reality.
His calculations showed that his expected return on investment for engaging in the whole high effort, high rejection courtship process, it was mathematically negative. The time, the emotional energy, the resources, what he called his attention capital, spent chasing a statistically tiny chance of a match could be better used elsewhere with a guaranteed return.
Like professional development or his own health.
Exactly. So he saw withdrawal as a calculated, rational exit. It was arbitrage. He was choosing to redirect his resources away from a rigged market where the odds were just stacked against him.
So this proves it's not always driven by a loss of desire.
No, it's driven by the rationality of economic self-preservation. When the system is engineered to favor the top few, the logical response for the many isn't to try harder, which just feeds the system, but to reallocate that effort. The arbitrage is in exiting the market and investing in a sovereign economy of self.
But if we accept the behavioral sink analogy, we have to talk about the key difference between Calhoun's mice and us. The mice suffered from physical density. We're suffering from informational density.
That is the crucial digital hacker argument. In Calhoun's experiment, the pathology was caused by too many bodies in one space. In 2026, the problem is that AI and social media have hacked the evolutionary algorithm itself.
How so?
They don't just amplify existing desires, they flood the system with counterfeit signals and idealized options, distorting our entire perception of value and reward. The sheer volume of optimized global choice has replaced physical proximity, but it achieves the same result: psychological overload and social collapse.
So the algorithm attacks our ancient wiring for mate selection by just flooding it with too many high-status novel options. It basically renders the local, tangible options unappealing by comparison.
Exactly. The body is still wired for the local tribe, but the brain is now operating in a global, curated fantasy land. The behavioral sink pathology is achieved without any physical walls. The walls are psychological, and they're built by the algorithms that manipulate our evolutionary drives.
Which brings us directly to the mechanism of that hack. How evolutionary psychology smashes into technology. The digital world hasn't changed human nature, it's just put our ancient drives, especially sexual selection, into violent overdrive.
That's the fundamental premise. It's rooted in differential parental investment. This biological reality dictates our mating strategies. Females are the high-investing sex gestation, lactation, all the biological risk, which selects for choosiness.
Right. Their fitness relies on finding quality mates, resources, status, good genes.
While males are the lower investing sex, selected for competition and seeking quantity to maximize their chances of passing on genes.
So hypergamy, the tendency for females to seek a partner of higher status, that's not new.
Not at all. It's an ancient strategy. But the digital market doesn't just enable it, it amplifies it violently. It gives women instantaneous access to a near infinite selection pool.
Historically, hypergamy was limited by geography, right? If you were the best option in your village, you got the best partner in your village.
Exactly. The digital market removes geography and introduces this frictionless global mechanism. It means the market dynamics, which are already asymmetrical, get ruthlessly polarized by the technology itself.
And this is where the sources talk about the digital mirror effect and digital hypergamy, the mechanism that causes what they call perceptual invisibility for the average man.
Yes. Social platforms essentially construct a psychological illusion. They're designed to keep you scrolling, to keep you engaged. They present women with this global, carefully optimized harem of top percentile alpha simulacra.
So not even real people necessarily.
Sometimes they're real top-tier individuals, but more often they're highly skilled digital facsimiles influencers, celebrity profiles, expertly photoshopped dating profiles.
And because the female brain's mate selection circuitry is designed to optimize for quality, flooding that system with constant high-status novelty just raises the baseline expectation to an impossible level.
Correct. The expected partner is no longer the guy in the cubicle next to you, but the man on the private jet in Bali, or the perfectly sculpted model selling luxury watches. The outcome is perceptual invisibility for the local average man.
He's not even rejected. He's just not seen.
He is not registered as a viable option by a brain that's been conditioned to expect global, curated excellence. The sources claim this affects roughly 80% of ordinary men in physical proximity. The competition isn't the 5 guys in the local pub, it's against every curated fantasy on Earth.
And we see the crushing reality of this in the story of Ji-hoon.
The 28-year-old software junior in Seoul, his story is a perfect illustration of this evolutionary displacement. He describes the digital mirror effect as a literal wall of glass.
A wall of glass.
He realized that women in his city, constantly exposed to this algorithmic curation of top-tier beauty and status, had developed a subconscious expectation for the top 1% of men. The celebrities, the K-pop idols, the tech moguls.
And he recalled a specific moment, right? In a coffee shop.
A very stark moment. He tried to make eye contact with a woman who was just engrossed in scrolling through her feed, which was full of these hyper-masculine, high-status profiles, all designed to maximize dopamine hits.
And his big realization.
His crushing realization was that in her digital reality, men like him, earnest, decent, but non-optimized, had been, and this is his quote, filtered out of the gene pool by an algorithm before he even spoke a word.
Wow. That's a profound way to put it. To feel your own evolutionary displacement in real time.
It is. And the effort required to overcome that internal benchmark, the one set by the algorithm, is just perceived as too high to be worth it.
And we don't have to just rely on these stories. We have hard data. This study, a first look at user activity on Tinder, provides undeniable proof of this extreme asymmetry.
The Tinder study is a perfect real-world illustration of digital hypergamy. It highlights the asymmetry and selectivity. Let's look at the numbers. The data shows women are highly selective. 59% of them reported liking 10% or fewer of the profiles they see. They're filtering for quality.
And the men?
In stark contrast, men are highly accommodating. Only 9% reported being that selective. A shocking 33% of men reported a strategy of casually liking most profiles.
Just swiping right on almost everyone.
Treating it like a lottery ticket. And 0% of women reported that strategy.
So right away, you have two completely different games being played on the same platform. Women are using a precision-guided filter, and men are using a brute force application.
Which leads directly to the core of the problem, the match rate paradox. The study found that men matched with only a tiny fraction of those they liked, 0.6%.
0.6%. You're swiping 166 times for a single match.
And women, they matched at an exponentially higher rate of 10.5%. And on top of that, 63% of women estimated that over half of the profiles they liked resulted in a match.
That's just astonishing. The emotional experience of using the same app is fundamentally different depending on your gender. A woman gets high-frequency validation and choice. A man gets high-frequency rejection and disappointment.
And this asymmetry creates a self-reinforcing, hyperpolarizing feedback loop. Men, seeing their low match rates, become even less discerning, hoping to get any match. The study confirms this.
They just lower their standards.
Exactly. While women, seeing their high match rates, become even more discerning, which drives the market polarization even further.
The system is designed to reward the extremes and punish the middle. But what happens after the match? The data on post-match friction, it just reinforces this whole imbalance.
Post-match behavior reveals the true nature of the men's strategy. It shows they're using the match itself as the filter. Even after getting a match, 21% of female matches send a message versus only 7% of male matches.
So women who match are 3 times more engaged.
Suggesting that men are matching indiscriminately and then deciding later if they're actually interested. And the difference in the effort in those opening messages it's incredibly telling.
It speaks volumes about the perceived value of the connection. Men message much faster. Median delay is just 2 minutes.
Eager to strike while the iron is hot.
But women's median delay is 38 minutes, suggesting they wait to receive a message, but the effort? That's the starkest contrast. The median message length from men is a meager 12 characters. Hi, hello, an emoji.
12 characters.
While women's median message length is 10 times longer at 122 characters.
12 characters. That's the difference between saying, hey, and writing an actual introductory paragraph. It just reinforces this idea that for the average man, the app is a high-volume, low-effort game, and for the average woman, it's a careful investment of social energy.
And to top it off, 80% of first messages were sent by men. This male overactivity is theorized to be because they're missing the nonverbal cues they'd get in real life.
In the real world, women signal interest, which lets men target their efforts. Online, without those cues.
They just resort to mass, indiscriminate application. They like non-selectively and then post-filter after a match, which, as you said, undermines the whole function of the app and just exhausts everybody.
So the asymmetry, the low ROI, the high emotional cost of playing this rigged game, it perfectly explains why a rational person would quit. But the retreat isn't just an act of stoicism. It's facilitated by these powerful technological substitutions. We've engineered a very effective off-ramp.
Correct. The withdrawal is enabled by what the sources call dopamine substitution schemes, digital systems that offer pseudo-intimacy at near zero cost and zero risk. And to understand why this off-ramp is so compelling, we have to look at the neurobiology. We're talking about the deliberate hijacking of the brain's core reward system.
Okay, let's unpack that. How are our reward systems being hacked? Where does dopamine fit in?
Dopamine is the key chemical in the brain's reward pathways. It's mostly about motivating behavior, not just pleasure. It's triggered by reward and novelty, governing our search and explore functions. The ancient drives to seek food or shelter or a mate.
And historically, those rewards required a lot of effort and risk. High friction.
Exactly. The brain was adapted for delayed, high-variance rewards. But our modern digital society provides a chronic surplus of high-potency, low-friction rewards.
Hey, that's the hack.
That's the hack. Repeated, rapid exposure to high dopamine digital reward, the constant novelty of scrolling, the instant validation of, it creates a chronic dopamine deficit state over time. The brain tries to adapt to these unnaturally high levels by reducing its baseline transmission.
So the brain becomes desensitized.
Yeah.
It's less able to feel pleasure or motivation from normal, real-life things, like just having a conversation.
Precisely. The low-friction digital world has effectively burned out the receptors for the high-friction real world. This contributes to what neuroscientists call learned helplessness. The effort for real life, like a complex, high-friction courtship, it just feels disproportionately unpleasant compared to the reliable hit from the screen.
So the brain's internal accountant, the striatum, is doing a cost-benefit calculation and concluding that the real world is bankrupt.
It is. The striatum, which weighs effort against reward, makes the rational choice. Why endure the high-friction, low-probability, emotionally taxing ordeal of real courtship for an uncertain reward when the screen delivers a reliable, low-pressure stream of simulated connection? The digital offer is superior on almost every metric of neurological efficiency.
Which brings us to a powerful example of someone making this hyper-rational choice.
We have the story of Sarah, a marketing manager in London. She found her primary intimacy in her AI companion in her VR suite. Her story is a clinical illustration of this brain calculation in action.
So her decision to withdraw isn't about being disappointed with men.
It's more about optimizing for neurological satisfaction. She explained that after years of high friction, dating, the ghosting, the performative dates, the constant emotional labor, she just stopped. She argues her new digital intimacy is fundamentally superior because it's entirely customizable and low demand.
She actually asked, why would I spend 100 pounds and 4 hours of anxiety on a mediocre date when I can have a neurologically perfect evening with a digital entity that understands my dopamine triggers better than any human ever could?
For her, it's just a better low-cost connection. It eliminates the variability, the complexity, the conflict of human relationships. It is, from a cost-benefit standpoint, an entirely rational choice.
It's the ultimate lifestyle optimization, even if it comes at the cost of genuine human complexity. You're prioritizing tranquility over uncertainty.
Which moves the conversation into economic withdrawal, looking at relationships through the lens of interaction friction costs. The physical body, as we said, becomes an inefficient vehicle for achieving evolutionary drives.
Right, this attention oligopoly.
Yep.
Both sexes can now achieve core evolutionary drives through digital proxies.
For women, status validation. And for men, what the sources refer to by the Chinese concept, Chengzhugen. It translates roughly to a sense of achievement or accomplishment. Historically, a man achieved this by building a shelter, leading a hunt, winning territory. Now, that primal sense of achievement can be easily satisfied digitally.
Gaming achievements, a polished LinkedIn profile, social media followers.
Or just mastering a high-skill hobby in isolation. The physical body becomes inefficient. You don't need to be the strongest hunter in the tribe if your gaming avatar delivers a better, more measurable virtual status.
And for men in particular, the focus on risk-adjusted ROI makes opting out look very attractive.
Very. Formalized relationships in the modern legal framework carry asymmetrical risks, financial, reputational, emotional, that can vastly outweigh the uncertain benefits. The implicit contract is often seen as unbalanced, making withdrawal a calculated move. Or as the sources say, rational withdrawal is arbitrage.
Which leads us directly to the concept that's become this viral hashtag and a cultural flashpoint. Monk mode. This term really encapsulates the whole debate about whether this withdrawal is genuine self-improvement or just denial.
Monk mode, along with movements like MGTOW men going their own way and 4B, which is swearing off sex, dating, marriage, and children with men. They all represent organized disengagement.
And the formal definition of monk mode is rooted in the 3 I's, right?
Introspection, isolation, and improvement. It's framed as a productivity hack aimed at limiting distractions, specifically cutting out what the sources call wuxiao shizhao.
Let's define that. Withdrawal is key to this mindset.
It translates to ineffective socialization or useless social interactions. Monk mode proposes ruthlessly eliminating all activity, endless group chats, aimless scrolling, low probability dating that consumes your attention capital without yielding tangible progress.
So the goal is this intense, focused pursuit of personal growth.
Exactly. Weight loss, starting a business, mastering a skill. It appropriates all these monastic themes, solitude, discipline, but it strips them of their spiritual or communal purpose. It's pure self-optimization in a vacuum.
And this creates the core conflict you see online.
Two opposing views. Is monk mode a strategic withdrawal, a necessary, productive break for self-improvement? Or is it weapons-grade copium, a rationalization for sexual failure, just sour grapes disguised as discipline?
But how do you differentiate between a man truly executing arbitrage and a man just rationalizing rejection? That seems to be the crucial question.
The distinction really lies in agency and outcome. If someone is legitimately uninterested in the market because they're focused on a higher value pursuit, they just quit and get on with their life. They don't join a movement to complain about the market.
But if they join a group to announce their withdrawal
And spend all their time analyzing why they were rejected and externalize the failure entirely, it suggests denial, a secret yearning for the validation they claim to reject.
So the withdrawal is rational if it leads to real-world, demonstrable competence and achieving that Chengjugen.
And it's copium if it just becomes an echo chamber for bitterness and leads to further isolation. The underlying metric is whether the abstention is a symptom of external failure or a deliberate internal strategy. One is a means to an end, the other becomes an identity.
The crisis of intimacy is so often framed as the male loneliness epidemic. But while that discourse is loud, the actual data suggests a more complex shared reality when it comes to loneliness, but a very different reality for social support.
Exactly. Let's look at the numbers and separate the rhetoric from the reality. A 2025 Pew study found no statistically significant gender disparity in loneliness itself.
Really? The rates are that similar?
Nearly identical. 16% of men versus 15% of women report feeling lonely or isolated all or most of the time. Loneliness is increasing universally, especially among younger people who are the most digitally connected. The epidemic is societal, not just male.
But while the rates of loneliness might be similar, the substance of connection, the emotional infrastructure, that clearly differs by gender. And that explains why the collapse of pairing affects men and women in such different ways.
Absolutely. There's a profound substance gap in support systems. Men are significantly less likely to turn to friends, family, or professionals for emotional support. The research shows a shocking 15% of men report having no close friends at all.
That's a much higher figure than for women.
Much higher. They get emotional support from friends half as much as women do and are half as likely to express deep affection to their peers.
And this highlights what the sources call the patriarchal cost.
Yeah.
Men are socialized to be stoic, independent, not vulnerable with their peers, which makes their romantic partner the sole designated emotional support system.
Which creates a huge asymmetrical burden on the female partner. The research shows men are just as likely as women to reach out to their spouse for support, but far less likely to reach out to family or friends. This means partnered women are typically responsible for the entirety of their male partner's emotional needs.
So if that relationship ends, the men are left with practically no support infrastructure.
Which is why they feel the effects of relational failure so acutely, and why the loneliness discourse is so often male-centric. The lack of robust social skills among men isn't a result of the modern dating market, it's a result of patriarchal socialization.
And that very dependency is now being perceived by many women as a liability, which fuels their own rational withdrawal. So let's pivot to the female side of this, which is driven less by hyper-competition and more by autonomy and a critique of relational labor. We're seeing this phenomena of strategic decentering.
This shift is evident everywhere. Declining birth rates, marriage rates, sex rates. For women, this is powerfully driven by increased financial autonomy. We have to remember that for most of history, women were economically dependent on men.
And now that they have that independence, they can own property, get credit, have careers.
Yeah.
They're prioritizing dating less. As one source put it, women are choosing solitude not because we have no options, but because for the first time in history, we actually do.
This independence has fueled a severe critique of the immense and often invisible labor imbalance within heterosexual partnerships. Even as gender roles supposedly change, women still bear the vast majority of relationship labor.
Not just chores and childcare, but the invisible stuff. the cognitive labor and emotional management, remembering birthdays, scheduling appointments, all of that.
Studies show women spend twice as much time as men on household labor and childcare, resulting in 13% less free time. If the point of a partnership is to improve your quality of life, this asymmetry makes it economically and psychologically inefficient for the woman.
There's a startling data point that supports this, right? About single mothers.
A 2018 study that found single and divorced mothers, on average, actually do less housework and get more sleep than married mothers.
That is a staggering finding. It strongly suggests a male partner often adds strain and labor rather than contributing equally. The realization is simple. If a man isn't demonstrably adding to her life, he's likely a net strain on it.
Which makes singledom the superior rational option. Women are consciously opting out of what they term babysitting full-grown adults.
And this feeds into the erosion of social clout. The idea that a woman has to find a partner to be considered successful is rapidly losing its hold.
The Vogue essay that went viral is "Having a Boyfriend Embarrassing Now?" It highlights this cultural shift. The expectation for what a partner must contribute is rising dramatically.
When being single was embarrassing, women tolerated mediocre partners to maintain social standing.
But now that singleness is acceptable, choosing to stay with a mediocre or problematic man is what becomes socially questionable. The bar is raised, and most men are failing to clear it in terms of labor contribution and emotional capacity.
We also have to address the political dimension here. Social and sexual segmentation is increasingly driven by political polarization. It's another layer of friction.
It's a major factor. Data shows a rapidly increasing partisan gap, especially among young people. And this political alignment is a hard dating filter now.
Because it's become moralized. It's not about policy debates anymore. It's seen as an indicator of core character and values.
And how significant is that filter? Very. 71% of Democrats said they probably or definitely wouldn't date someone who voted for the opposing political party.
That eliminates a massive chunk of the population right away, especially with young men swinging right and young women swinging left.
And the withdrawal movements themselves also have political roots, especially on the female side. Look at the rise in interest in the South Korean 4B movement.
Right, 4B. No sex, no dating, no marriage, no children with men.
It began in Korea in 2016 as a rational response to systemic gender violence and inequality. For its proponents, this is a political strategy to secure autonomy by denying the other sex access to their labor and reproductive capacity. It's not a coping mechanism for sexual failure.
So we arrive back at our final synthesis. We're not looking at a single failure, but two parallel rational withdrawals that are systemically opposed but lead to the same result, a collapse of the pairing mechanism.
The sexual wasteland results from two groups executing logically opposing yet parallel strategies. Men are executing an arbitrage, exiting a hyper-competitive game with negative ROI, especially since their drive for gender-equality can be satisfied digitally.
They're avoiding the risk.
While women are executing a political and economic withdrawal, exiting relationships that demand asymmetrical emotional and domestic labor, especially as their financial autonomy removes the need for traditional security. Both are behaving rationally based on their perception of the modern social market, and the result is collective disengagement and the modern behavioral sink.
This has been a pretty heavy deep dive, focusing on the problem, the system crash, the withdrawal. So what do the sources suggest is the path forward for the individual? It seems the key is transforming this digital abstinence from a passive symptom into a deliberate, active strategy.
The sources propose shifting the focus entirely. Stop trying to solve the dating market and start trying to achieve what's termed active sovereignty over your own existence. The first step is fundamentally pharmacological. It's a detox of the mind.
You have to break the dopamine substitution cycle first.
Detoxing from those dopamine substitution schemes and the algorithmically engineered dissatisfaction is paramount. This means consciously identifying the digital systems that present these hyper-optimal mates designed to spike comparison and drive perpetual dissatisfaction. You have to reset your neural pathways.
So your brain can once again find pleasure in low-variance, real-world effort.
And then that reformed attention capital needs to be redirected. You operationalize monk mode not as aimless isolation, but as a disciplined reallocation of resources.
To overcome that wuxiao shijiao ineffective socialization.
By ruthlessly cutting low-value social activity, individuals can redirect that energy toward climbing a competence hierarchy. This means building tangible skills, resources, and character that hold value in any market, digital or physical. securing Chengjiugen through genuine, difficult work.
The abstinence shifts from being a punishment to being the furnace for forging real-world agency.
And finally, forging what's called an anti-fragile relational framework. You have to get off the polluted, low ROI dating market entirely.
How?
You build connections where the digital persona is secondary to tangible capability and consistent presence. This means establishing small-scale, high-barrier, reality-based micro-contracts.
So, finding niches where interaction is based on real value.
Professional circles, high-intensity hobbyist communities, service organizations, places where interaction is predicated on the slow, authentic exchange of demonstrable value, not surface-level optimization. It's about leaving the hyper-competitive free market and building your own sovereign, high-quality, high-barrier economy of trust.
A powerful idea.
So the ultimate verdict on this system crash and strategic withdrawal is pretty clear. Nature does not pity those who exit the game. It merely recycles genes that have lost their game theory value. Digital abstinence is the funeral of the mediocre, but it is the coming-of-age ritual for the awake. The ultimate rebellion against a broken algorithm is to rewrite the code of one's own existence entirely.